many other...
Hello and welcome to WION Live, broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and in this bulletin we'll be bringing you updates on stories taking place all around the world. First up though, the headlines. Sparked by former President Jacob Zuma's jailing, crowds clash with police and ransack shopping malls in cities across South Africa. At least 72 people have lost their lives and over 1,200 have been arrested. The Taliban claims the capture of a strategic border crossing with Pakistan as the militant group looks to choke off much-needed revenue from the government in Kabul. The UN Refugee Agency warns that Afghanistan is on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe due to the escalating conflict. There are now an estimated 270,000 newly displaced Afghans inside the country. In Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 9 Chinese workers, engineers, surveyors and mechanical staff are among 13 people killed after an explosion on a bus. Pakistan is investigating the cause of the blast. China has called it a bombing. Bangladesh will lift its strict COVID-19 lockdown restrictions for the festival of Eid al-Adha, even as new infections continue to soar to record levels. Between July the 20th and 22nd, all restrictions will be eased. And Singapore unveils one of the world's largest floating solar panel farms, spanning an area equivalent to 45 football fields and producing enough electricity to power the island's 5 water treatment plants. Rioting, looting and deaths continue in South Africa for the 6th straight day. At least 72 people are known to have died now in the country and more than 1,200 have been arrested so far. The violence started after the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma. These are pictures from Pietermaritzburg, where a mall has been set ablaze after being looted. Police and security chiefs have held a meeting. South Africa's police minister has called on citizens to stop the rioting and looting immediately. Around 2,500 troops have been deployed to try and quell the violence in South Africa. But just hours after President Cyril Ramaphosa made that deployment, stores in 2 South African provinces had been ransacked.
No amount of unhappiness or personal circumstances from our people gives the right to anyone to loot, vandalize and do as they please and break the law. We call on the communities to exercise restraint in dealing with the situation and above all ensure that innocent civilians are not harmed. We further urge all communities and groups to reject any call for violence and making the country ungoverned.
The violence started in Jacob Zuma's home province, KwaZulu-Natal, but then spread across several major cities. In South Africa's Gauteng province, shops and businesses have been vandalised, trucks and cars have been burned, and traffic has been disrupted. Major roads and highways have been barricaded. At a Johannesburg mall, hundreds of people have been seen carrying goods away from shops, while outnumbered police simply watched on. The government says the days of protests, looting and riots could lead to food and medicine shortages in the coming weeks. People have started queuing for some supplies in Durban and other regions. The protest started on July the 9th with the stated intention of opposing Jacob Zuma's jailing. The 79-year-old former leader of South Africa has started his 15-month-long prison term. Zuma led the country for 9 scandal-marred years, during which over $35 billion are estimated to have disappeared from state coffers. Police said disturbances had intensified as Zuma challenged his 15-month prison term in the country's top court. The judgment in that case has been reserved. Our correspondent now, Kalden Ongmu, reports from one of the ravaged malls in Gauteng province.
I am at Chris Hani Crossing Mall. This is the recent mall that has been attacked yesterday by the looters. Part of this mall was also set alight. Here are the firefighters. They were quick to react and they say they were able to douse the fire. They've been busy since yesterday. I spoke to some of them and they said they've been busy since last night. Huge police presence, both from the South African Police Services as well as Ekurhuleni Metro Police Department officials are here. This is one of the trucks that the police has brought to confiscate some of the things that the looters were taking. But you know, it's very surprising. Upon our arrival here, there's a heavy police presence, but the way community members are not fazed at all. Some of them were still trying to get through the fence and help themselves to some of the shops. You can see live on visual here. Police are making an arrest. One of this person was trying to get in and take the little of what has been left in the stores. You can see here, there's the EMPD as well as the SAPS officials. These are some of the people that have still trying to get into what has been left. The little that has been left. Just look at the conditions of the shops here. Here is one of the shops. They're just trying to get their hands on the little that is left in the shops. Hello.
Hi, Lily.
Are you guys employees here?
Yeah.
So how do you really feel about this?
We feel so very bad.
So now, you don't have a job. What are you going to do?
Oh, we don't have a job, madam, now. And we don't know what we're going to do. But only God knows, guys. We don't know. We lost our job. Really lost our job. And we don't have nothing. Even now, we don't have nothing. Because we're waiting for payment on 15. Obvious, when like the shop is like this. Obvious, madam.
What would you like to say to the community members that are doing this?
I want to say to them, guys, the way once again Akona, guys, is so very bad. Because now we lose our job, we don't have nothing.
Yeah, some of the employees trying to help get whatever they can in the truck. This is actually a butchery that has been looted. So this is the current situation right now. You know, the pandemic has already hit the country so hard. So many people have lost their jobs. And now this, it's really going to take a lot for the country to rebuild. This is Kalden Ongmu from Chris Hani Crossing for WION. World is One.
Kalden Ongmu reporting there. Well, besides trying to contain violence and arson, authorities in South Africa face another major challenge: At the same time, the country is battling its worst COVID-19 infection wave yet. South Africa's recording an average of about 20,000 cases a day. Hospitals and makeshift COVID wards are flooded with patients as the Delta variant surges through a mostly unvaccinated population.
At an emergency COVID-19 ward in southern Johannesburg, medics attend to gasping patients and wheel oxygen cylinders from room to room. The scenes at this converted community hall are a sign of how badly South Africa has been hit by its third and most debilitating coronavirus wave yet. The infectious Delta variant is sweeping through a mostly unvaccinated population. This disaster management facility has been set up by Muslim charity Gift of the Givers to ease the burden on Joburg's overloaded public hospitals. It's led by Dr. Fatima Lambat.
The Delta variant has caused enormous strain on the resources in not only private but also public facilities. So every hospital is getting strained, every healthcare worker is getting strained.
South Africa is recording an average of about 20,000 cases a day, while nursing cumulative active cases of more than 10 times that number. Doctors say they've never had to deal with so many COVID-19 infections all at once. Catherine Naidu describes being admitted to the ward.
If you look at the news and see how people are going on, passing away and things, it was the most frightening experience.
Alongside the surging cases, vaccination rates are low. Just 4.2 million doses have been administered to a population of 60 million. Officials say they aim to reach a vaccination rate of 300,000 a day by the end of August. Africa's most economically advanced country has been worst hit by the virus, with around 64,000 deaths. But low levels of immunisation are a problem across the continent. Earlier this month, the World Health Organization's Africa Regional Director, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, said just over 1% of Africans are fully inoculated. That compares with 11% of people globally and over 46% in the United Kingdom and the United States.
Moving to Asia now, where Indonesia's again recorded its deadliest day in the pandemic as hospitals become overwhelmed. The Southeast Asian nation recorded over 47,800 new cases on Tuesday, with 864 people dying from the virus in the 24-hour period. The latest outbreak has been fueled by the spread of highly contagious Delta variant in the region. With the surge in cases, local oxygen producers say they are struggling to address the shortage. Hospitals are overwhelmed, with bed occupancy rates in many areas already exceeding capacity. Authorities, meanwhile, have unveiled plans to order liquid oxygen and tens of thousands of concentrators from abroad. Thailand is also witnessing a significant surge in its COVID case numbers. Thai authorities are defending mixing two different COVID-19 vaccines to battle a surge in infections, after the WHO called that a dangerous trend. Authorities in Thailand say they will mix a first dose of the Chinese-made Sinovac jab with a second dose of AstraZeneca. The country is currently struggling to contain its latest outbreak, also fueled by the Delta variant. Virus hotspot Bangkok and 9 other hard-hit provinces are now under stricter restrictions that include a nighttime curfew and a ban on public gatherings. Hospitals are on the verge of collapse in Thailand, with authorities struggling to provide beds for COVID patients. And moving on to Malaysia, where a coronavirus vaccination centre has been shut down completely after over 200 of its workers tested positive. The Southeast Asian country is battling a serious outbreak driven by highly infectious variants. On Tuesday, Malaysia reported 11,079 new infections, the highest in a single day since the beginning of the pandemic.
The COVID-19 vaccine centre in Malaysia has laid down its needles after almost half the staff tested positive for coronavirus. Out of 454 workers and volunteers screened over the weekend, 204 have been infected. The facility, which can give 3,000 doses a day, is located around 15 miles outside Kuala Lumpur and has been closed for cleaning and a change in staffing. People who received their vaccines between July the 9th and 12th at the centre are now being advised to self-isolate for 10 days. Malaysia has announced new measures to support its ailing public health system as a wave of cases, fuelled by the highly infectious Delta variant, sweeps across the country. On Tuesday, 11,079 new infections were reported, the third daily record seen in the past week, as well as 125 deaths. Malaysia has one of the highest per capita rates of infection in Southeast Asia, but also one of the highest rates of inoculation. About 25% of the population have received at least one dose of a vaccine.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has won a key vote on the government's decision to cut the country's overseas aid spending by around £4 billion a year. The British Finance Ministry announced in November it would cut aid spending to 0.5% of national income from 0.7%. This broke a 2019 pre-election commitment by the Johnson government. However, Boris Johnson says the UK's overseas aid spending is still more generous than other rich nations.
In the teeth of this crisis, amidst all the other calls on our resources, we can take pride that the UK will still invest at least £10 billion in aid this year, more as a share of our GDP than Canada, Japan, Italy and the United States. And it would be a travesty if honourable members were to give the impression that the UK is somehow retreating from the field of international development or lacking in global solidarity.
Johnson told lawmakers the cut in foreign aid spending was necessary due to the cost of the coronavirus pandemic, which has seen the UK's national debt reach historic highs. Last year, Britain's budget deficit was nearly £300 billion, or 14% of gross domestic product.
Last year, under the pressure of the emergency, our borrowing increased fivefold to almost £300 billion, more than 14% of GDP, the highest since the Second World War. This year, our national debt is climbing towards 100% of GDP, the highest for nearly 6 decades. The House knows that the government has been compelled to take wrenching decisions, and the International Development Act of 2015 expressly provides that fiscal circumstances can allow a departure from the 0.7% target.
The Prime Minister assured lawmakers the cut in foreign aid spending is temporary.
So I can assure any honourable member who wishes to make the case for aid that they are, when it comes to me or to anyone in the government, preaching to the converted. And we shall act on that conviction by returning to 0.7% as soon as 2 vital tests have been satisfied. First, that the UK is no longer borrowing to cover current or day-to-day expenditure, and second, that public debt, excluding the Bank of England, is falling as a share of GDP.
Government budget forecasters said in March they did not expect the budget for day-to-day spending to be in balance before 2025. A number of Conservative lawmakers have voted with opposition parties during previous attempts to reverse the cut. Conservative former Prime Ministers Theresa May and David Cameron, as well as church leaders and charities, all criticised the move. Theresa May said the cut would hurt the world's poorest as well as Britain's reputation, while saving relatively little money.
Mr. Speaker, every member here was elected on a manifesto to retain the 0.7% target. And it matters that we keep our promises to the world's poorest, particularly at such a time of global uncertainty.
As the Taliban continues to make territorial gains in Afghanistan, more and more civilians are fleeing their homes. The United Nations Refugee Agency is warning that Afghanistan is on the brink of a humanitarian crisis. The UNHCR says an estimated 270,000 Afghans have been displaced since January.
More Afghans are likely to flee their homes due to escalating violence, the UN Refugee Agency warned on Tuesday, as the Taliban take control of more territory in response to the withdrawal of US-led foreign forces. Babar Baloch of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees said Afghanistan was on the brink of another humanitarian crisis, one that can and must be avoided.
So there is a 29% increase in civilian casualties during the first quarter of 2020, when 2021 when compared to the numbers in 2020, according to the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. An increasing proportion of women and children were among those being targeted. A failure to reach a peace agreement in Afghanistan and stem the current violence will lead to further displacement within the country as well to the neighboring countries and beyond.
The UNHCR said an estimated 270,000 Afghans have been newly displaced inside the country since January, bringing the number of people forced from their homes to more than 3.5 million. Those forced to flee blamed the security situation, extortion by non-state armed groups, and improvised explosive devices on major roads, as well as a loss of income and interruptions to social services, Baloch said. The US general leading the war in Afghanistan, Austin Miller, relinquished command at a ceremony in the capital Kabul on Monday and quietly left the country, a symbolic end to America's longest conflict. US President Joe Biden has acknowledged that Afghanistan's future is far from certain, but said the Afghan people must decide their own fate.
That is all we have time for on today's WION live broadcast. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Do join me then, but for now I'll leave you with these visuals from Singapore. The island nation has unveiled one of the world's largest floating solar panel farms. It spans an area equivalent to 45 football pitches.
Solar energy, in fact, is one of the most important source of green energy. In order to facilitate our Singapore Green Plan, solar energy is something that we really need to deploy and increase the deployment.
This is right, Arab.